This podcast is part of the Listen Frederick Podcast Network. To learn more, visit listenfrederick.com.
The Fedora Files.
Hello and welcome to the Fedora Files. I'm Gregory Fedora, and with me is a great guest. I'm excited. Ben Tejada-Ingram. Did I do it right?
Yeah,
Close.
you got it right the second time.
Yeah, Tejada. Yeah.
Tejada.
And you've written this book, and I got it, The Lands Forgotten by Time, The Lost Worlds and Legends, a Cryptozoologist's Guide. And I love it. Before we started this, I told you I'm about halfway through because I'm a slow reader, and I keep rereading. And what's cool is, like, some of these things I've heard of before, some I hadn't. And even the ones that I heard of before, like the stuff you wrote about, I didn't know. And I was like,
oh, good.
Oh, that's really cool. Like, I didn't know, like, I don't want to get into all of it, but like before, how did you get into like the folklore, cryptozoology? What was it that drew you to it?
Oh, man. Yeah, that's a good question. And yeah, thank you. I really try to make some kind of like things, even if it is something that everyone has heard of. I want to try to give you something new that maybe you didn't know about that. But yeah, I try to include a few in here that maybe no one knows about, which is exciting. But how did I get into all this? I think as a young child, I watched a TV show called Sightings on the Sci-Fi Channel. Back in the day. That probably started off the whole obsession. And yeah, ever since then, even in the sixth grade, they did like a career report, like, what do you want to be? Even back then, I was like, paranormal investigator. So nice. I went and did a whole report on that. It's pretty funny, but yeah, I mean, growing up, I had like what I think was a Bigfoot experience.
Oh, really?
Yeah, if you want me to.
Yeah, tell me about that. I'd love to hear that. Yeah,
so I grew up in Ashland, Oregon. It's right by California, not too far from Bluff Creek. The whole famous Patterson-Gimlin area is very close.
That's like the whole Bigfoot trail all the way up into Alaska, that area, right? Like,
well, yeah, I think like if you look at the Bigfoot map, like the current best one, it kind of like follows the Cascades, which are this big mountain range, like they go all down through Oregon, California. But anyway, so my parents grew up out in the woods out in Southern Oregon, and I was in the sixth grade, and me and two of my friends were camping outside on this big trampoline outside of my parents' house. And we had like done this before, but this particular occasion, we kept on hearing some like really strange sounds out in the woods, which is pretty normal for like the woods. Like you always hear things. Yeah. But this time, like it sounded kind of like footsteps. And like we heard them, it sounded like they would come from one direction, then stop. Then we would like hear it from another direction. And then it would kind of stop, and we were like getting really freaked out, like, but it was fun at the same time. And we were kind of like getting scared because we're sure there's something out there or multiple things out there. Yeah. And so anyway, we're about 20 feet from the house, and then 20 feet to the side of us, like it's a level area. And then the 20 feet, it's kind of a 45-degree angle. The hill slopes down. And we hear maybe, like, I want to say 50 feet from down the hill from where we can't see, we hear a very loud cracking sound. And it kind of sounded like a small tree being snapped. Oh, wow. Very, very, very loud. And then immediately after that, we hear running footsteps running up this little hill or incline. Bipedal, like very, very loud, crash, 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 crash. Something is charging us up this hill. And when it gets to the top of the hill, it's like 20 feet from where we are. it lets out a screech. And
wow.
It was a very, very, very high-pitched, like deafeningly loud, kind of terrifying screech.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, it was dark, and like we all just ran, like our kind of like fear instincts. Like I don't think any of us even looked. Like it was kind of like that fight or flight response takes over. So we all just booked it back to the house and locked the door.
You're out of there.
So to this day, I swear, like there's nothing else that I think it could be other than Bigfoot, because it wasn't like any of the normal animals you would find in Southern Oregon.
Yeah.
It wasn't a bear, certainly not a bear. It wasn't a mountain lion, even though like maybe you might think like it's possible a mountain lion because mountain lions can screech.
Yeah.
Like they're known to like yowl and make like really creepy noises. But it didn't sound like that. It sounded like something that was running on 2 feet, and whatever it was did this thing where like the small tree being broken.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't make sense. Like how would a mountain lion do this?
Yeah, mountain lions.
So that was my cool encounter I had. So
that's awesome. That is cool. Now I'm curious, like, of the cryptids and the monsters and the folklore, what is one of your favorite ones?
My
other
favorite,
other than Bigfoot,
all right,
because I'm assuming
I have a couple.
All right.
So probably my absolute number one favorite one is this one on the cover of my book, the Mokele Mbembe.
Oh yeah,
that one's my favorite one. But I also have another favorite one, which would be Champ.
Okay.
I'm a fan of all the dinosaur-ish ones.
Okay.
But I think Champ is very, very cool and interesting. And for anyone who's not familiar, that's the one in Lake Champlain in is it Virginia? Or Vermont. It's Vermont.
Yeah.
And I think that one is really cool because like that one is pretty similar to the Loch Ness Monster. And there's actually like a couple really, really crystal clear photos of it. But what really I find to be the most interesting is there have been 3 different occasions where people have recorded echolocation in that lake, which is absolutely bizarre because the only known species that are supposed to be able to echolocate are dolphins and beluga whales, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, there are
something's doing
freshwater dolphins that exist in the Amazon River, but Champ
I don't think
certainly
they go up
isn't
that
a
far.
dolphin. Yeah. There's not supposed to be one up there.
Yeah.
And like the documentation of these echolocations are very, very like impressive. Like if you watch Monster Quest, that's like the big focus of like, I think it's the first ever episode. They record like these strange noises and like all over the lake.
Yeah.
And it's pretty unmistakable. Like it sounds like it'll be dead silent and then you'll hear like these really fast clicking, like click, click, click.
Oh yeah.
And more recently, another show that filmed this happening that most people haven't seen was a show called Paranormal Declassified. It was another like travel channel show.
Okay.
And on that one, they repeated the experiment and they dropped like an underwater microphone into the lake, and they picked up the exact same noise. And to take it a step further, they took it to a forensic audio analysis lab. And those guys, like their main job is to analyze, and they have they're hired by the police usually, but they are able to match like any sound that exists in their database. And they matched it perfectly to a beluga whale. They're like, this is the only audio signature that is like anything close. So, well, it was a perfect match, which is pretty bizarre.
Yeah, that there.
Like even a beluga whale, like they aren't supposed to exist at all in fresh water.
Yeah, and how did it get into the lake?
That would be interesting to me if Champ was a beluga whale, which is possible because lake used to be like connected to the ocean. Yeah. And then like thousands of years ago, like the bridge to the ocean kind of like closed off.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a possibility. And I don't know, though. Like everyone describes Champ as like this, like kind of like reptilian, plesiosaur type thing. Yeah. So it's. I mean, there's something there, though. Like I'm positive of it.
Oh yeah, there's got I think there's that one. Another one that isn't. It's like Lake Norman. I don't know if you've read about like Normie, the Lake Norman monster. That's in North Carolina. It's another similar like Loch Ness. And the weird thing about that place is that was a man-made lake. Basically, I mean, it was small, but then they dammed it up and it became huge. And some of the weird things that went on there is like they all of a sudden they had like jellyfish, like out of nowhere. Jellyfish showed up. They also caught alligators. That's
really weird.
Yeah, they caught alligators there, and alligators aren't really from North Carolina. Like, it's like why they're there.
I'd say people must have brought those in.
Yeah, but they just no one knows why. But then people have seen this monster. Like I think it was like about 5-6 years after the lake filled up, and it's one of the largest. I think it is the largest man-made lake, at least on the eastern side of the United States. But it's like huge. It's huge and it's really deep. And people have seen this thing and they don't know what it is. And but I said like weird stuff all around that place. And that's like very similar to like I love lake monsters. I think they're fun. And
yeah, me too. Like, to be honest with you, I am kind of skeptical of Nessie, like the Loch Ness monster.
Yeah.
I think that one has been scrutinized enough, and I don't know, I think that whatever is there could be some kind of giant catfish or eel that people are seeing that kind of explains. Like, I think people have studied that location enough, like even recently.
Yeah, they just went out there again on a search. I know that. But I think that there probably was something there at some point. And then like over time it's gone and, or it died, I mean, because the first recorded are hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So it couldn't be the same thing. It would have to be an offspring unless it lives for 100 years. I don't know. But I would think at this point they would have caught it by now. I mean, I know it's a deep, but it's not a huge, huge lake. Or loch, whatever. They don't want to call it lakes. So now, about your book, though. Now, you've written 2 books. This is your second one. Now,
yes, sir.
Yeah. What was your first one? Like, because I have not picked that one up yet.
My first one is called. I don't have it on me right now, but
yeah, that's fine. Yeah,
it's called "The Last Dinosaur of the Lost World." Okay. My search for Little Nessie, and available on Amazon if anyone wants to check it out.
And Little Nessie is in South America, right?
So this is one that I researched. I haven't been to Venezuela yet, but it's reported to be on one of the giant plateaus or tepuis they have in Venezuela. In this particular case, it's all centered around this one called the Iron Tepui. I could be saying that wrong, but that's the location that Angel Falls, the highest waterfall in the world. And anyone who's watched the Disney movie Up, that's the same like real life location, that whole movie. And kind of my whole like case is based on, right? Because in Up, they like have this like dinosaur like thing, like Kevin the dinosaur bird. Well, the one isn't a bird, but then they have like this hermit guy who lives out there. And like, so Up was actually kind of loosely based on this whole thing. And how I heard about it was, here we go. I found a copy of my book if anyone's watching.
Oh, cool.
The Last Dinosaur of the Lost World. Check it out.
Nice.
So yeah, I heard about this in, I'm pretty sure it was 2006 or 2007 from a internet post on a bulletin board made by this Venezuelan guy called, his name is Jose Miguel Perez Gomez. And he kind of introduces himself in this post online as an archaeologist and an explorer. And so he says he has been exploring like this particular plateau in the area for a long time, just because he's interested and likes to, and it's kind of like this remote, unexplored area, even to this day. It's very, very hard to access. You have to like take a helicopter. You have to take and even to the like base camp below, you have to go on a boat for 4 days from the closest city. So,
oh, wow.
He said like while he was out there, like on this journey by boat to get there, he started meeting this hermit who lived in a little shack right along the riverbank. And the hermit, he kind of like befriended him over the years. And the hermit, one time he told him a story about seeing some strange looking animals up on the plateau, because this hermit had actually explored the area and was probably the first person ever to reach this area by foot, which is impressive. But anyway, he told him the story, and he showed him some drawings of it. And it was basically described as a 3-foot long miniature kind of creature that had a long neck and flippers for its feet.
Oh, wow.
And he even like drew pictures, which I put in my book. So anyway, Jose Miguel, he thought that was really weird, and he thought it looked kind of like a plesiosaur, but a very small miniaturized version of one. So he decided he was going to look for this thing like the next couple times he went out there. So he did. And so he made it his mission. And on one of his expeditions, he went up and he found up on the top of the plateau, which is a massive area, by the way. It's like 20 miles by 20 miles. He found this one like very good water source, which was kind of connected to a few rivers and formed a small pond or lake. And so he camped out there for a number of days. And on his very last day, he says that for a split second, he caught sight of the creature, and it was sitting on the bank of the river and then just plopped back in the water. But he was absolutely sure of what he saw. It was exactly like the hermit had described. And so on the way back, he had the pilot fly over this lake, and he snapped a bunch of pictures. And in one of the pictures, he actually caught what could be the creature. Like, it's kind of blurry because he's in a helicopter. But it looks like something sticking out of the water, like a little neck. So that was kind of the gist of his post. And he mentions at the very bottom, oh, by the way, there's a couple other people who've seen it, including a pilot and a professor. And that was it. And at the time, I was a lot younger, and I didn't really know what to make of it. I didn't really know to believe it. But more recently, I would say like probably 5 or 6 years ago, I decided to look it up again and wanted to get to the bottom of it. So I was able to get in contact with Jose Miguel Perez Gomez, and I started messaging him, and he assured me it was all very true and real, and he had this experience, and he referred me to the other witnesses. And so that's what my book is. It's an investigation, and I did track down the other witnesses. I went over all the history, the hermit. There's a couple ones in the historical record. And apparently what is really fascinating also is just recently, I learned actually after I published the book, they found in Africa a plesiosaur, like a kind of a smallish one that actually lived in a freshwater river system. And that was like the first discovery ever. Before, like people had considered plesiosaurs like these open ocean dwelling marine creatures. But they found a number of ones that are like small, roughly the size of the one I'm talking about in here that did live in rivers. So it's kind of totally. I think it's a real thing, and I should mention if anyone wants to read the book and get like the full story and all the information about it. All of the witnesses are extremely, extremely credible people. For example, my main source, Jose Miguel, he is a university-trained archaeologist. He has like a degree from university, and he has authored a number of scientific papers. He's made a number of very, very important archaeological discoveries. So, like people like that don't usually lie about things of this nature because sometimes they're afraid it might like hurt their academic reputation. So, I mean, he has absolutely no reason to lie, and that's kind of like the same with the other witnesses that I was able to come across. So that's my book.
Yeah, well, usually like people of that caliber don't even if they have an experience, don't want to say anything because they're worried that people are going to be like, okay, you're crazy, and now they don't want them around. And So now when you moved on to your second book, the one I got, what was it that you wanted or drew you to want to do this? Like because like I said, you researched all these places. Like I said, some I haven't heard of, some I had. And like, I part of the stuff I do love is like how you're talking about like the different like creatures that we haven't found yet, but then you mix it in with creatures that people thought weren't legit. And then they found them, like the ox and some of the other. And that to me is always cool. Just like a lot of these animals that people didn't realize, like people don't realize like panda bears are really a recent discovery to the Western world. But like in all these like different creatures are like, and even gorillas and stuff, people like in the
gorillas,
like they're only like a little over 100 years old, really. I mean, they were discovered, I think, to the Western world like 1840s or something. So if you think about it, that it's very not recent. Even it hasn't even been 200 years that before that it was like, oh, that's not real. And and so it's kind of cool how I love that you were intermixing like the chapters I was reading that I've gotten through so far. Like you mentioned the different creatures that these deer-like things existed and nobody knew it.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, thank you. I think like what really made me want to write the second book was, so the first book, it's called The Last Dinosaur of the Lost World. And that's a reference to Arthur Conan Doyle and his famous novel, The Lost World, which is about like, it's supposedly fictional, about people who find this plateau, like just like the one I was talking about, out in the like the Amazon rainforest, and up there are a bunch of dinosaurs that are like undiscovered, and it's a lost world because it's like somewhere so remote that no one knows about it, and there's surviving like prehistoric creatures there. And I mean, after researching this book, I was kind of like came to the conclusion that like these so-called lost worlds are actually real. And something interesting I learned is there's over 100 similar plateaus in Brazil and Venezuela, and most of them are completely still unexplored. Like they're just so utterly remote. And the few that they have explored, like they have discovered that most of the species that live there are actually endemic to those environments, which means they are native to those environments. Like they don't exist anywhere else in the world. which is fascinating. So I kind of was thinking, if this place is real in Venezuela, there's probably a lot more so-called lost worlds that exist all around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And like, so my idea was, I'm going to try to look for the most remote, unexplored, unknown places where very few people have ever been, if anyone has ever even been to these places. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to find ones that are also associated with cool legends or reports or encounters of cryptids, which was actually very hard to do. Like, because these stories and these like specific places are kind of few and far between. And I mean, there are quite a lot of places actually that are considered like remote and unexplored, but most of these places aren't, like, you can't really find any good cryptid stories because like no one knows what's there.
Basically. Yeah, they haven't explored it enough. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I was able, like, that's why the book is kind of short. Like, I did go into great detail of all the locations that kind of like fit that criteria. I tried to uncover everything I could, but yeah, there's a couple ones that didn't make it into the book, but were still super interesting. I can tell you about one real fast. So there's a mountain in Africa. I've never told anyone about this one, but it did not make the cut for my book, but it's still absolutely fascinating because it's called Mount Lico, and it looks like just a normal mountain, and it's kind of like in the middle of a African like savanna plain, and there's this massive mountain. And someone was recently looking at it on GPS, and they were like, oh, on the inside of it, there's a whole like bowl. It's kind of like hollowed out on the inside. They looked at it on Google Earth, and they're like, there's a whole forest down there, like completely surrounded by this massive mountain. And and apparently the walls of the mountain are just sheer vertical cliffs, and they extend like almost like thousands of feet. So like it's almost impossible. Like no one has ever been up there. So it's very recently, and like they made a whole National Geographic documentary about it. The first ever scientist who discovered this place, he did an expedition, and they had to like get like the mountain climbing gear, the rappelling gear to like even make it into there. And they scale the mountain. It's incredible. It's like a sheer cliff. And then they drop down, and they're in this untouched forest that no one has ever been to, or so they thought.
Yeah.
And so they're exploring, and they discover like a couple new insects. And I think it was like either a frog or a lizard they found that was completely new to science. But then what's really, really weird is they come to like this little waterfall area, and they found pottery there, like very ancient pottery.
Oh, wow.
And they like documented it, and they're like, this is strange. And like even in like the later analysis, the art style and the like, I guess it was like kind of artistically made. It didn't match anything like in that region of Africa. It didn't, like, they kind of like say, yeah, this culture made it, that culture made it. It's kind of like a very strange mystery, because how did a human being with no like mountain climbing gear get up there?
Yeah.
Like, it had to be like a free solo situation, some extremely dangerous, brave person must have climbed this sheer cliff with absolutely no harness or nothing in very ancient times, and like somehow survived.
Made it in. Yeah, made it down.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. But
anyway,
that's
awesome. I need to check that out. That sounds so awesome. I need to check that documentary out.
Yeah, I mean it's not a cryptid, but it is kind of a strange mystery, I would say.
Yeah, I like those kind of things. That's very cool. Now I was curious. Now, like as I said, I don't want you to give away all the stories in your book, but
yeah,
in it, what is one of your favorite ones you researched for this that you stayed in the book?
all right. I'll tell you about
other. I know that you love the cover guy. So.
Yes. All right. I'll tell everyone about probably the one that absolutely no one has heard of, which you probably saw at chapter 2. So, so this one is the Thunderbird of Fiji, which is what I like to call it. And so everyone has heard of the every cryptozoology nerd knows all about the North American thunderbirds. They're all over in Native American legends, and supposedly, like in the old Western days, a couple cowboys had run-ins with like these giant, strange birds, or maybe even pterodactyls. And there's this whole thing about like a missing photo. I don't know if you've heard of that, but there's even a few purported pterodactyl photos from the Civil War era. But anyway, Thunderbirds, no one has ever really associated them much outside of the United States, but or Canada, I should say. But so what got me interested in this one is I was talking to a friend who had to remain anonymous because he doesn't want anyone to know who he is. But we were talking, and I was talking about my Bigfoot story. And then he tells me, he's like, I saw when I was growing up, I grew up in Fiji, he tells me, he says, I saw a giant bird, and I was probably a young child. I was out playing in like this field out near my home in Fiji. And he says, I saw this giant bird that looked like a dragon. Like I thought it could be a dragon. And it swooped in and it grabbed a guy who was out working in this field, like on some crops, picked him up and carried him away. And the guy like screamed even.
Yeah.
And it was terrifying. And he said he went and told his parents, and his parents didn't believe him. And I found this to be like kind of shocking.
Yeah.
I didn't really know what to think about it. But he then kind of told me, like, I have never told anyone else this story because people think I'm crazy. No one believes me at all. So I said, well, perfect. You told the right person because I'm going to get to the bottom of this, and I love this kind of stuff. So I was looking online for like any kind of association with giant birds in Fiji. And I was able to find one reference in a like 100-year-old book entitled Myths of the Polynesians. And this one particular book listed in Fiji mythology, there's this giant man-eating bird, supposedly, that it's all very mythological. Like it's not really stated like it's a real creature, but it's part of the ancient mythology. And so I was like, okay, that kind of like fits the bill of what we're looking for here, but it still doesn't really make sense. Like, why haven't more people encountered this thing? So I was doing some more research, and I found out that, well, Fiji is, it's in the Pacific. It's a island nation, and there's 300 islands. And it's basically the entire human population is centered on just 2 of those islands. And there's like, I guess the exact number is there's 100 populated islands. And then there's another 200 islands with 0 human beings, 0 population. And these things like extend in a chain, basically. So, yeah, the big islands are where all the people are, and no one, I guess you could say like sometimes the tourists will kind of like go island hopping but they won't probably ever make it to the end of the island chain. They might go to a couple like of the really nicer spots out there where no people are and have like a day trip, but they won't like ever explore every single island. So it kind of like made sense to me. I was thinking like no one goes to these islands. There could be a population of these birds there. But I was still like, the whole thing sounded a little bit far-fetched. So I was doing some more research and I came across a very similar legend from New Zealand, actually. And New Zealand is the closest country to Fiji, which is interesting. So in New Zealand, they had another very, very similar so-called legend. And it's about a giant man-eating bird that was supposedly able to carry away children and livestock. And the interesting thing about this one is it was actually based on a real story. And I found this out because I was just looking up the name. It's called a pukai, and the native New Zealand people talk about it. But then pretty recently, a bunch of scientists were like, look, this isn't a legend. This was a real creature, because they had found on New Zealand fossils of a bird of prey, an eagle, which was the largest eagle that has ever existed in the history of the world. And it's called, for anyone who wants to look this eagle up and like get the information about it, it's called the Haast eagle. It's Haast. And I encourage everyone to look up the Wikipedia page on it. And what's really interesting about the Haast eagle is it actually went extinct very recently, like as recently as 600 years ago, which is presumably the extinction date, but that's only like the last fossil they found, because like they carbon dated the most recent fossil to 600 years ago. So according to science, it's now extinct because human beings basically hunted their food sources. They hunted the eagles themselves. And so, everyone thinks these massive birds, by the way, like their wingspan could have been like 10 to 12 feet. These things were absolute monsters. Like think about a bald eagle of today. Like those are pretty big. The Haast eagle could have been up to 3 times as large. Like these things were absolutely insane. So, so my theory about it all is I think that these eagles must have migrated to Fiji somehow, even though it's a very like long distance away over the open ocean. I don't know how it happened, but I think it had to have happened. And maybe my theory is human beings could have brought them over. Maybe they brought over some of the eggs and let them loose. And if these eagles could fish, which most eagles are able to fish, they would have access to an unlimited supply of food. And there's also something that kind of makes you think. It's called island giganticism. And it's the phenomenon which applies to any kind of like large or even apex predator creature that lives on a small island. It can apply to herbivores or any kind of animal that somehow winds up on a small island. Over time, these animals will grow just basically to much, much bigger size than they would if they were stuck on the mainland. And it's called island giganticism. And the reason how this works is, let's say you got like a predator species. They have access to as much food as they could want and zero competition for that food. Zero predators. So basically like these, whatever, like think about the Galapagos giant tortoises. They're basically like the same anatomically as every other tortoise, except they're just a whole lot bigger. And the reason why is because they, like ever since they showed up on those islands, they've had zero predators and access to all the food they could ever want, so they become giant.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I think is going on with these birds out in Fiji, is they have been there for a while, and they've probably gotten even bigger than the Haas eagle was. I think they're probably much bigger.
Yeah.
In fact, so much bigger that they could definitely easily be capable of carrying away a fully grown human being, which sounds crazy at first, but when you think about it, it all kind of makes sense to me. So
yeah,
that's my theory about it all. And yeah, my friend, by the way, who told me the story was like dead serious about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like he told me like he doesn't want anyone to know who he is even, and to this day he hasn't told like another person, because it's like, it's something he I don't know, like people will think you're crazy at first. But I told him, maybe after this book you might want to, people won't think you're so crazy once you get into the research behind it all. So so yeah, that's the Fiji Thunderbird.
That's awesome.
As I like to call it.
So do you have another book planned? Are you working on that you can tell us about, or is it a secret?
I'll tell you about, I have probably just begun another book.
Mm-hmm.
I got a lot of work ahead of me, so I don't think it will be out anytime soon.
Mm-hmm.
My new book, I think it's going to all be about cryptids and cryptozoology in the Amazon rainforest.
Oh, cool.
I recently came across there is a Czechoslovakian author who in the 1970s wrote this really interesting book called Curupira. And he claimed that he found this area where Arthur Conan Doyle actually based his book on. It's in Brazil, and it's an undiscovered plateau, which is home to like all these dinosaurs. And he documented all these reports. He actually went there. And since he published his book, it's not very well known outside of Czechoslovakia, but I've learned people from there are absolutely obsessed with it, but no one here has really ever heard of it. And basically the few people who have like looked into it all say it was a hoax, because they say, look, this place, Curupira, isn't even real. Like there's no plateau in Brazil that at all like exists called that, and nothing that really matches that description. So I started researching this topic, and I translated the book. I found an electronic copy of it, and I got translated. It's not available in English, but I found that the author gave some very, very precise clues about the location. He actually like geographically pinpointed it like to a T. So yeah, I was like, okay, I'll prove that this is real and it's not a hoax. So I looked it up, and it is a real place, and it's actually marked Curupira on a few historical maps, but they changed the name of it. So you can't find it really anymore by looking up by that name. But I did come across a bunch of confusion because some other people have looked this same area up, and they all say like there's nothing there, like there's no plateau. But what there is a giant cliff line, and the cliffs are separated from the lowlands by an elevation rise. I looked it up on topographic maps, about 300 to 500 meter, and they're very jagged. And so I kind of like the hypothesis I have is like, yeah, this wasn't technically a plateau, but in the 1970s, before satellite maps, anyone who went on an expedition there and actually found this location from the ground, it would look like a plateau. It would look like one of these lost world things, and you wouldn't really know the cliffs extended for like thousands of miles. They're actually the Guiana Shelf or Shield. It's actually just a small part of the Guiana Shield, which is this massive geological formation that exists in 3 countries and is huge. But apparently what makes this Curupira area very special was the fact that it's alluded to by all the native tribes and the native people as being the area where a great evil lives. And what's even more interesting was Arthur Conan Doyle put this in the book, The Lost World. You can look it up. He says, like, they're talking to the natives in the book, this supposedly fictional book, and they all say, Curupira, that's where, like, the demon of the forest is, and they all point in a certain direction. So not only does Curupira, like, mean demon spirit of the forest, it also refers to this very, very specific location. And when you do, like, the research about it, what makes it kind of special is it's this area that used to be called Curupira, and still to this day, the native Yanomami Indians are very afraid of. It's basically the source of 3 different major rivers. Like, they all spring from this area. And so, like, I think that's kind of why it must be some kind of hotspot for cryptids in particular, because, yeah, the cryptids reported there, like, there's a bunch of them, and they're pretty, like, well corroborated. I think, like, all the various water sources are what makes this area very special and unique. And I can definitely see it as being a area where some of these, like, very fantastic reports are all centered in, based on the fact there's all these, like, springs and probably caves actually too, which is pretty interesting. And the cryptids that they report there. So you got one that's the Mapinguari, which is the Brazilian Bigfoot. But most people, like, look, that one's pretty well known and it exists all over Brazil. And of course, like, it's reported to be at Curupira. And that one, most people kind of liken it to an extinct giant ground sloth, which went extinct in the last ice age, supposedly. But the modern day reports of this thing all kind of, like, match this giant hulking creature with long claws. And it's supposed to be, like, really scary. People hear it shriek and will be aggressive. But that one's very well known. And as a matter of fact, it's known by a number of different names. And some of the Venezuelan tribes, they don't call it a Mapinguari, they call it a Didi. And it's the same thing, though. Like, it's listed in the cryptid wiki. It's like, this is also known as a Didi in Venezuela.
Oh, wow.
And what kind of makes it all more interesting, that kind of points to the theory that maybe Arthur Conan Doyle knew about Curupira, is in his novel, The Lost World. If anyone is unfamiliar, on their Lost World, there's supposed to be a tribe of so-called ape men, anthropoid ape men, he calls it. And they're kind of like these kind of like Bigfoots that are evil. And there's a big conflict. But anyway, in that book, the native Indians call them dodos, dodas. And I kind of was thinking about that a little bit more, and I don't think it is possible for the word Doda and Didi to be so similar. Like, that has to be the exact same thing they're talking about here. And so the kind of like the thesis of my book is that all the creatures in the Lost World are also ones that are documented to exist in Kurapira, like I'm talking dinosaurs, and the greater Amazon, because I don't think they're really isolated to Kurapira. I think Kurapira, like, certainly is a major hotspot for all this, but yeah, there's reports of all these things. Like, yeah, the Amazon basin has so many reports of various dinosaur-like creatures, and I'm gonna get into it in my new book and kind of like connect all the dots.
Yeah,
and that's
look
one of my
forward to
new
that.
ones. Yeah, thank you.
I do. I need to pick up your first book too because I want to read about that. Now, I want to before you go, I want you to be able to tell like all your books are on Amazon, but you also have
Yes, sir.
social media sites. Do you like your Instagram? If you want to tell everyone that so they can follow you there. I know it, but I'll let you say it.
Yeah, it's Anomaly Hunter X.
Nice.
Anomaly Hunter X. I also have a joint YouTube channel with my good friend from the Reality Czars podcast, Nate Chavoya. Our channel is called Anomaly Hunters with an S. So if you go on YouTube, type that in, and we've been doing a bunch of like paranormal investigations, various interviews, as well as we did a Bigfoot hunt a while ago. So we kind of haven't posted anything for a while, but we definitely to bring that one back and do some more.
Yeah, I'll put the links to both those, like both your Instagram and that YouTube channel in this so people can click and go to it. So it'll be easier for them. But yeah, I'll definitely, like, if they go to my YouTube channel, they can like click to yours and find it and find your Instagram.
Yeah, thank you. Excellent. Yeah. Appreciate it.
And I appreciate you coming on because like I said, I'm really excited about this, and I hope you'll come back. Like, if you have anything else you want to share, or when you get your next book done and ready, I'd love to have you on and talk about it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's so much fun. Like I said, if you have not gotten this book, you need to go get it. It is a great read. I'm getting through it because I keep rereading. I've reread the first 4 chapters twice now, just because I'm like fascinated. And like I said, like I told you before, like I read it and I'm like, wait, what is that? And I go back and read it again. I was like, oh yeah, and like I said, the Thunderbird thing in Fiji was fascinating. And then I love the sanctuary, the Mountain Yeti place. Like that's one of my favorite stories. And
if anyone is watching this who came from my links, like I'm definitely going to post the links to this interview. I encourage everyone to follow Mr. Gregory Fedora. His page is amazing, and you post all sorts of cool lore and cryptozoology and other things. And plus, you have a cool hat, which I am envious of.
Yeah, this one was made by a lady. This is made out of sheep wool.
Oh wow!
I met her at a farmer's market, and I was just like, can you make a fedora? And she said yes, and she did.
Sheep wool.
Yeah, so
I've realized that's
like, all right.
probably what I'm missing. I was kind of thinking about that. Every very famous cryptozoologist has a signature hat.
Yeah.
So man, I need to get on that in the future. But anyway, I am a fan of your channel and your content as well. So
thank you. Thank you. I keep going. I enjoy it. Like I said, I like looking up these crazy monsters nobody talks about. Even if I don't think they ever existed, like some of the old mythological monsters. Like everyone knows the main ones, but there's all these other side ones that I think are so fascinating. And I was like, I've got to bring them back so people know about them so they don't get forgotten because they're just so cool. The stories on them. And then there's obviously the ones that I'm like, these things probably do exist. Like, but and I love sharing those too. And in my mind, I always think that even mythology is based on some truth. At some point, someone saw something, and
I agree.
they, and the world's so big, and there's so many things we can't explain. And like you said, there's been discoveries of like that mountain in Africa, like pottery inside it, how that got there. But at some point, somebody else was there, who or what or how, we don't know. But
right, it's yeah, I agree with you. It's really fun getting into these like lesser known things out there. Because once you like really look into some of them, you realize, oh my God, these are actually probably based on something real.
Yeah.
And
somebody saw something.
I mean, I think it's more interesting. Like a lot of people out there are so focused on like one thing, like I don't know, like Bigfoot. Like I love Bigfoot, but that's not the only interesting thing out there.
Yeah, I think there's so many others out there. Yeah, exploring these other ones a little bit more. It's awesome. And you too, and I love this book. I've told some of my friends to get it. I said, cool. I told them they had to go buy it themselves. I'm not going to share it because I was like, no, you got to get your own copy. Come on,
good.
It's not that expensive. Come on.
Yeah, come on.
It's like slackers. But those of you listening, those of you listening or watching or however you found me, please like, subscribe, share, tell other people. And I said, go to Ben's Instagram and his YouTube channel. The link will be below. Get his book, both of his books. And when his third book comes out, get that one too, because these are awesome reads and he does awesome research and he's a good writer. Like it's like really well written. It's not like, it's not tedious or it's not like what? It's like it's totally like you're like, yeah, this you did a great job putting it together. Like because I've read some of these kind of books before where you're just like, what are they saying? I'm lost and like.
Man, thank you. I know what you're saying actually.
Yeah.
But thank you. I really do appreciate that. That's awesome to hear.
Yeah. And And again, like I said, thank you for checking us out. And remember to, as always, stay safe and keep searching.
Fedora Files.
Check out FedoraCRT.com today.